On tonight's episode, we met Aoife Hughes from Aoife Hughes Coaching, who told us very openly and honestly about her journey through life with ADHD and her later in life diagnosis, and how she has developed that into her own business as an ADHD coach. This was definitely one of the most insightful and interesting interviews we've ever done on the Sligo Show, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge help to many of you out there. I hope you enjoy.
The Sligo Show is produced by Pixel Productions and hosted by Brendan Tierney. If you need video for your business or live event or would like to appear on the show, send us a message today.
This show is in partnership with ATU Sligo Innovation Centre, the hub of innovation and commercial enterprise for startups, industry and academia.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sligo Show with myself, Brendan Tierney, and we're joined now by Aoife Hughes from... I would call you an ADHD coach. Is that the best way to describe?
It is.
That is your job.
That is my job.
And you're the first person I've ever heard with that job.
Yeah.
So how long are you doing this job? Or like, I can obviously guess what does it entail, but to a more technical aspect, what does it entail?
Well, have you heard of a life coach?
Yep.
Okay, so an ADHD coach is a life coach who specialises in ADHD. So I trained as a life coach, but I also did my ADHD training with the ADHD Coach Academy in America, in New York.
Oh, okay, so it's for adults, kids, everyone? It doesn't matter what? Or have you specified?
It can be. So there's family coaches, there are coaches who work with children, there are coaches, like you can niche down as far as you want to go. I work with adults and I work with families. I prefer to work with parents, although I've had a lot of inquiries from parents about me working with their children. And I have found through my previous work as a mental health education consultant is that when you work with the parents, everybody benefits. But when you work directly with the child, it stops with the child.
Okay, I can understand, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're empowering the parent to help and support and empower their child. And it's sort of like a win-win-win,
So when you were back doing your leaving cert, I assume no career teacher or whatever told you should become what path did you follow and why?
So I laugh when you mentioned leaving cert. There was a shop I passed by every day, and they had this deal on aero bars, and I'd say I was in there 2 or 3 times a week, and it was like, how can I smuggle them up to my bedroom? And obviously I would do that. I'm studying, but I would just sit up there eating my aero bars and listening to music, and I would draw schedules. I was great at drawing the schedules on
when you were going to study.
Yeah.
Okay, I do a bit of that as well.
I had a few of those. So luckily I had an amazing career guidance counsellor when I was doing my leaving cert, and I drove her crazy, and she pulled me aside and she said, Aoife, will you just do sport? Because I was heavily involved in playing basketball at the time, and sport and leisure management was becoming the thing. Ben Dunn was opening his gyms. That'll give away my age a little bit. And so I did. So I applied to everywhere in Ireland for a place on a sport and leisure management programme, and I ended up in Sligo.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
The famous, is it the Rec and Leisure?
Yes.
Ah, there you go.
We were called Rec and Pleasure back in the day.
Well, and I knew a lot of people in that course that did a lot of pleasure as well. Now, yeah.
There wasn't much academics being done, but it was... I was really focused on going to Waterford for the basketball team, but I missed it by 5 points, and I came to Sligo, and I will say it was the best 4 years in college and the best 5 points I ever missed. I love Sligo, so to be back here living now and settling down is really cool.
And so college too, I'm just trying to get to join the dot now. So after college?
Just as an ADHDer, my brain goes off in different directions, so feel free to...
So you were diagnosed ADHD as well yourself? Okay, so I don't know if we actually said clarify that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just very recently, so 3 years ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I mean, I suppose either of us growing up would have ever heard of an adult getting diagnosed, or even children back in the old days.
Barely, no.
So as an adult, at what point did you go... Did someone say something? Did you start querying it? How did you know maybe there's something here that I might need to get looked into?
So long story short, my husband is a doctor and he'd been training for the last 15 years, although up to those 3 years it was 9, 10, 11, 12 years. And COVID hit, we had 2 losses in our family, and we were coming up to our move over to America. And the moves really rattled me. Like, I really struggled with the change. Like, we moved from Dublin to Meath to Galway back to Dublin, and then we were going to America. I invested in a therapist, but one that I wasn't going to just go to for a certain length of time. So she got to know me really well, and over the course of that time of her knowing me really well, but she also, I had shared that I had done all this work in mental health. So I was practicing all of the strategies that we are, taught to practice.
Yeah, the best practices.
Yes. But the January before the move to America, I started spiraling again. And this was before COVID, and I noticed all of that. And then when COVID hit, I said, I'm just going to get a therapist, because they were going online, and that was really helpful. So I found a therapist. She was amazing. I worked with her, and 7 months in, she said to me someday, "Oh, when are you going to write a book about your life?" And I just started crying. And I said, "Oh, don't talk to me about writing. It's really something I struggle with." And she just had a light bulb moment and said, "Oh, have you ever been assessed?" Now, I don't think it was just because of that. It was based on 7 months of getting to know me.
Getting more in-depth knowledge.
Yeah. So from there, I just took it as ADHD. I'd been a teacher as well for 20 years, and I'd been reading children's reports for years. And I used to always say, "Oh my God," drove my teachers crazy. I wonder what they'd say about me. But I never connected the dots, because I was an adult and these were children reports. And at the time on social media, it wasn't a thing, even though that was only 3 years ago, and you think it was, huge about all of these, people so-called self-diagnosing. But funnily enough, when I was on social media, it was Mel Robbins who I followed at the time. And
I really love Mel,
yeah, and she was sharing about her late diagnosis, and just light bulbs went off then once my therapist said it, and then Mel said it. So then I went ahead and sought a diagnosis, and I passed the test.
You passed.
I did. It's very proud.
So, like, in a nutshell, so as an adult who has functioned obviously at a high level, teaching and whatnot, when you were diagnosed, what did you feel? Did you go, "Oh, I'm so relieved, oh, everything's explained," or did you go, "I didn't wake up the next morning, everything's different"? Or or was it going, "I'm now understanding slowly," or people around me? What was the biggest win as such for understanding where you were at?
Yeah, it was very cathartic and emotional at the same time. It was just, those 4 letters explained so much. And because I'd struggled with change, I'd struggled in relationships and friendships, my memory. Like, my husband has found keys everywhere else except where the key should be.
All right, okay.
And I mean, that's just, trying to read maps, there's just loads of anecdotes, loads of stories there. And some of it is funny, but some of it was really stressful and distressing. And my mental health really suffered when I became a mother, and there was so many layers. I really struggled with anxiety and social anxiety, and so just all of these dots were finally connected to some degree.
And it brought some level of understanding, I suppose. Is that the best?
Oh, huge! But at the same time, I didn't actually know about ADHD then what I know now, because when we went to America, I told my husband I can't teach anymore, and the system broke me, and that's probably for another podcast. But I knew when we came back from America and came to Ireland, I just needed to do something different. I loved teaching, but it was the system that broke me. So when we went to America, I wasn't allowed to work. I was on my husband's visa. I decided, right, I'm going to become an ADHD coach. And I'd found out about it, and I learned that there was a few Irish ADHD coaches, and the place to train was in America, and it was all online, and it was in the same time zone, and it just kind of all worked out. And I had the time and space to decompress after teaching and moving. And I did the training over there. So, yeah, I've only been coaching for like a year and a half, but because of my experience in mental health education, consultancy.
So you've done another layer. You have an emotional, apologies, I forget the course you do. You teach emotional...
Unlocking Emotional Mastery.
Sorry, okay.
Yeah.
Can you even briefly give us a gist of what, like, if I walk into that course, what am I learning or doing essentially?
You're learning about your brain.
Okay.
You're learning the skills of emotional regulation. And what that is like, so many of us walk around with, we might as well, I have this image in the presentation of, a skeleton holding their head on a tray. And that's what the majority of us walk around like. We're just totally disconnected. We're all in our head, and we don't connect the brain and the body. And for ADHDers, we feel everything to the nth degree. And there's so many traits with ADHD that I didn't learn about until I did my training. And that's when I really learned about what ADHD is and how debilitating it can be, and that it really is an invisible disability, especially when it's undiagnosed and untreated and unsupported and misunderstood. And my brain is just gone.
That's okay. My question turned in my head is going sadly we see nowadays, sure, everyone's on the spectrum a bit. Sure, everyone's a bit of it. Like, I assume that drives you mad. People saying that. It's kind of...
To say it drives me mad. Like, it's very belittling.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things going on. Number one, there's still a huge level of fear attached to anything related to the brain, whether it's mental health, ADHD or autism. If there's any sort of quote unquote difference, yet we're all different. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I heard a comedian say recently, if everybody was autistic and ADHD and diagnosed, our world would be a quieter, calmer, less overstimulated.
True. I understand you mean.
Kinder, more empathetic place. Yeah. And it's not that the incidence of ADHD and autism has risen. It's that there's more awareness there. The field of neuroscience has just grown exponentially in the last number of years. Like, they didn't even know anything about ADHD in women. When I was growing up, it was boys, and it was all hyperactivity. And so to say that is really, there's a nervousness there. It's like, we don't know.
They don't know Usher. Like, they'll grow out of that.
Yeah, We don't know how to hold space because it was nothing that we were ever taught. In Ireland, we grew up in a society where children should be seen and not heard. And, you didn't express how you were feeling to anybody. You'd be grand, And that still continues. So when you tell somebody they have ADHD, and I've had clients and I've experienced it myself. Now, I've done it in a very ADHD way. I've blurted it out to people and they're like, oh.
When you say I have ADHD, like obviously it's not even obviously clearly, but they're clearly not afraid, or they go, oh, do they get a bit awkward? Or they go, are they interested? Going,
well, it's a bit of both. It depends on the person, and it obviously depends on the time and the time that you're sharing it. I remember with two friends of mine, I just told them in work really quickly, and they were going back to class, and they were like, okay. And I was just like, Aoife, like, that wasn't fair. You know what I mean? But that was very impulsive of me. It was very ADHD of me.
So you can catch yourself in a moment now.
Now I can. Okay. Now I can. Yeah. And that's the beauty of emotional regulation, to go back to that, is when you learn about your brain on a mental health level, okay, when you learn about the parts of the brain that are involved in how we act, think, feel, and then learn about the connection between that and ADHD, that awareness that creates is life-changing. So myself and a friend of mine, we had set up a business in teaching mental health education because we saw that as teachers we weren't trained how to help children who were struggling with major levels of anxiety in the classroom. And this is pre-pandemic. So that business ran its course, but the content is still as valid today as it was in 2017 when we started it up. And it's still really worrying to know and see that our education system still hasn't caught up, that this content is still not being taught in schools. Honestly, that this content isn't being taught in maternity hospitals. Like, I wish somebody had handed me, this book and that book so that I knew about my child's brain, and I'm talking about the Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Bruce Perry and, all the leaders in the field, such as those. And, so like we've come a bit of a way, but we've a long way to go, a really long way to go.
And like when someone says, oh, that person's child has ADHD, or a teacher's told that child has ADHD, like, could you give them like 3 or 4 little tips to go, just think of it like, to make them understand how handle that situation? Is that a thing to give someone some? I'm sure, obviously, in your coaching.
It is, because I'm smiling now, and I'm not smiling because of the situation, but I was working with a client this week, and their child has learned how to advocate for their needs. And one of the most helpful things that we can do for our brains, ADHDers, is movement. So the more dysregulated and stressed and overwhelmed we are, the more movement we need. Tiny bit of movement can make a huge difference. Okay.
In just calming that situation as such, or releasing.
No, just bringing our prefrontal cortex, our logical brain, back online again.
Okay.
And like, I'm doing a 6-week course, so we don't have time for that now.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah. But I just find this all fascinating. And when you messaged us the other day, and I said, I really want to learn more about it. I'm intrigued by it, but I know there's tons of people out there that are lost.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with this or some level of neurodiverse difficulties, and you pretty much can't get assessed. You're in this pit, like, if there's a parent out there that goes, look, I'm pretty sure my child is some level ADHD, for example, like, would you, this isn't a sales pitch, I'm the one saying this, to contact you to go, look, we don't know for sure, but we're fairly sure. Could you be a service to them to go, look, I can show you some things that might work for you, and then you might do them and you go, oh,
yeah.
So I would say would that be a calling card, like, for someone to go, Aoife might be the lady I might need to chat to.
Yeah. And I'll come to that in a second. I want to just finish off, because I didn't finish off the point about, no, it's my fault, because I'm going the wavy way instead of going the long way. But how do you explain to somebody in a nutshell about ADHD? And there was a situation with a teacher and a student, and in that moment, like, just the connection was just completely lost. And that child was let down, and not because of the teacher, but the teacher hasn't received the training or the supports or the awareness or the understanding. And the way I talk about it with my clients, with whether they're parents or whether they're teenagers, is if you can equate having ADHD with, if you were in a wheelchair because you couldn't use your legs, would you tell a child in a wheelchair to get themselves up the stairs? Yeah. Sort yourself out there, get up the stairs. But if an ADHD child asks for a movement break, it's pretty much like being told, will you just cop yourself on? What do you need a movement break for? Okay. You're fine. And
it's a very simple thing to do, whether it's a team, a class, a family situation, whatever. So that's what I'm trying to get, those little simple mini tips that might just, people watching might take.
Well, movement is medicine. Okay. And as ADHDers, we can get really overstimulated and overwhelmed. So sometimes we need space, and maybe sometimes we can't show up to certain events and be there for the whole event. We might just want to go for a little bit and come away again. Like, I have loop earplugs and I need to bring them in certain situations where before I would have felt weird. Because I would have worried that that's how people would have thought of me. And a lot of people say, what about the label? Why are you worried about the label? It's like, well, I prefer, like, even though ADHD is a label that none of us in the ADHD world like, it doesn't accurately describe what it is that we experience. And, it's a very negative reference to how our brains work. Autism is no longer referred to as ASD, and they don't use highly functioning or low functioning or Asperger's. They're called, like, using autism and embracing that and accepting that. That hasn't, unfortunately, transferred over to ADHD. So when you hear the label autism and you hear the label ADHD, you've understanding, you've awareness, and you've somewhere to go. Or I can go on the As I Am Ireland website. I can go on the ADHD Ireland website. And there's a host of websites out there with information. But if I don't get the diagnosis, but I still present with all of these behaviours, I'm going to get the label weird. I'm going to get the label, oh, she's odd. Yeah. She's really annoying.
Yeah. And would you, to someone watching, whether it's an adult, to go, I'm querying it myself, for example, the person might say, you could be their first port of call, because it seems to me the way the services are at the moment, it's got to go the private route. It seems to be the only way. So I know you may obviously do diagnosis. But I know that, and that's what I'm saying. That, but you go, look at, while you're waiting, here's some things you might want to read, or I'll guide you, or here's a bit of coaching. So that's obviously something as well that you can help with.
So coaching is considered one of the top supports for ADHD. And the reason being is that, first of all, we work with the ADHD brain. So if you're an ADHD adult or a parent of an ADHD child, you're going to be sitting opposite somebody who has ADHD. So
Yes.
we get it.
Yeah, you're being listened to in a compassionate ear who goes, I can relate to everything.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's even
you're
better.
You're seen.
Yeah.
Because, and I will say the same. You get your diagnosis, and it's like, right, off you go. Merry Christmas. It's like, well, what do I do with this? Like, where do I go? Who do I give it to?
Yeah.
And I'm an adult. Never mind. And I've seen it in schools, in the primary school system. It's an uphill battle every single day for all the parents of children with additional needs and neurodivergent, and that's including neurodivergent children.
And you said a lot of them are invisible. So they probably don't get any leeway in any capacity sometimes, people can't fathom why they're acting the way they act or whatever.
Well, the invisibility is also because of our ability to mask. And that's especially true of women and girls. And that's why we went undiagnosed for so long, and why we continue to go undiagnosed for so long is because of our capacity and ability to mask, and because of societal expectations. We learn those at a very young age, and then when you were masking,
did you know you were masking, or did you just go, I'm just surviving a situation, or did your brain have any kind of go, trying to get in the head to understand? Like, did you realise what you were doing?
Not at the time, but I always thought I was weird. And because the way I masked, well, when I was socialising, is I drank. Like, I drank copious amounts. Well,
Okay.
I didn't have to drink copious amounts because I didn't take a lot, but I would drink to get drunk.
And just release this situation.
And then I was just, then I thought I could be myself.
Yeah, okay. Did that work out well, or was that not a good play?
Not great.
No, okay.
It varied. I've since given up alcohol, and I gave up alcohol before I got my ADHD diagnosis, and that's been one of the best things I've done for my brain. But I was always second guessing myself. I was always seeking other people's validation and other people's opinion, and I couldn't breathe almost without asking somebody else, did I breathe okay? Because I never understood myself. So I always looked to other people to reflect back who I was. But what was being reflected back to me was like, now I can say, it just... Yeah, I was a huge ball of anxiety and social anxiety, and I'm also 6'2" to add to the mix.
I know, so you can't really hide away too easily in a crowd.
No. And when you carry that difference with you as well, and I also was my mum was a single parent, and growing up as in a single parent household in the late 70s, early 80s, that carried another stigma. So I actually thought a lot of my challenges came from my height and the shame I carried, or the awareness that I carried of being a child from a single parent household.
Wow.
But and there was an element of truth to both of those. But when I found out about the ADHD, I was like, okay, that's it.
Yeah. And the family that had grown up with you, or partners, did they all kind of go, now that makes sense, we understand? Did they get a relief or of such, to go, now we can help now, or we understand why you were this way at different times?
No, because, and that's been really blunt,
Okay.
because they didn't know anything about ADHD. Okay. And even when I told them, they were like, yeah, but you're not like a 7-year-old boy. What are you talking about? So I think it's only now, because it's becoming more mainstream. The other overwhelming thing is that when you get a diagnosis, or when you hear somebody else's a diagnosis, it's really hard to find information that isn't a book this thick. Yeah. It's like, I wish I could just give people a book on Aoife.
Yes.
I don't have the energy
Here's
to
the
write.
manual.
Yeah.
This is what you might have to deal with at different times.
Here's some visuals.
Yeah.
I found Gabor Mate's book, Scattered Minds, really, really helpful. And I read that before I got my assessment. And however, I was very aware of his work and his work around trauma. It's not an easy book to read in any shape or form, and it's not one I'd recommend if you're not used to his work.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. This is the beauty of YouTube nowadays. You can find all these Mel Robbins, different people. I've deep dive into those. I just find them so interesting. Yeah. So, the book, but you found this book especially.
I found it really helpful, and then I gave that to my husband, and he read it. And when he read it, he went, okay, I get it now. I get it. I mean, you know, he said to me, like, I don't need to read this book because I could write a PhD about you, you know, because at this stage we're together, I don't know how many, like 14 years. And I said, you could, but you don't know about ADHD. And it was, and he was like, yeah, you're right. So when he read the book, it was just ding, ding, ding.
Okay. So nowadays, what's the toughest moments for you now with ADHD? Or have you just adapted so well? Or like, you know, is it still tough?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not like I'm understanding, I'm learning more. No, it's still just tough. Certain situations you can't help but they'd be tough.
I'm still in the wheelchair. I still have the wheelchair.
Okay.
ADHD is relentless. It never goes away. And that's the hard part. And the analogy I like to use is the laundry or the washing. Sorry, I lived in America for 2 years. I got the laundry thing. But the washing, the washing analogy, right? So you have your washing baskets around the house, right? And you know they're there. They're always there. And then one day you're like, I'm going to get on top of all this washing. And you get the washing done and there's great drying outside and you even get them folded and ironed. And then you come and you're like, oh my God, there's a sock. You know, and it just reminds you, this is never done.
Okay.
This is never done. And that's, for me, that's what ADHD is like. There are days when I'm on fire and I can knock everything out of the park. And then there are days, and I could see a sock and I'd be like, it's grand. It's just a sock. But there are days I'll see the sock and it'll just knock me right out. And nobody sees that, only my husband and my kids, you know. And obviously I don't, you know, I try and protect them from it as much as possible. But because I have all the language around the brain and that emotional regulation piece, they've been learning that since they were 3, whether they liked it or not. So I use that language. Having a really tough day, my chimp brain is taken over.
Yeah, the monkey mind is
pardon?
The monkey mind is I read this.
Yeah. I had a gorgeous moment with them over in America. I hadn't told them about ADHD, and I just said to them one day, you know what, Mom's brain just works a bit differently, and there's just some things that I find really, really hard. You know, I forget things and I'm late for stuff, and then they started listing off. Oh, is it because, you know the way you reverse the car into the house the whole time? Is that because you're ADHD? And I was like, well, yes, I don't have great spatial awareness, and you know, and it just felt like this is what it should be like.
Yeah.
You know, kids are incredible, and I love teaching mental health content to kids because they get it so quickly, and they're so accepting and they're so understanding, and they're like, oh, okay, your brain's wired like that? Okay, cool.
Yes. They haven't been given any of these judgmental thoughts to have to build. Yeah. No. Now they know the norm. It's like, of course, they have ADHD or whatever. Okay. Yeah. It's nice that the world is starting to come around to that as well. Like, you know. Well,
it's nice that our generation has the language to pass on to the younger generation, and that they're bringing about the change. You know, it's harder with the older generations, you know, because they're coming with all of their stuff, and I know they have the best intentions, and, you know, they're open to learning as well, which is really cool. But sometimes it's like, oh my God, what is this new thing? Another new thing that I have to, you know, come to terms with. But the really cool thing now about my kids knowing, and it's not something I go around wearing a sandwich board, you know, Mom needs help with her ADHD, but they're my accountability people. Like, so, like, I remember one day they were going to school and we had to leave the house at 8:30, and I started baking bread at 8:20. It's my time blindness. It'll only take me 10 minutes. Yeah. My daughter was like, is this your ADHD? And I went, it is. She goes, can you do it later? I was like, I can.
So that helped you go, oops, caught yourself.
Oh yeah, she reined me in.
Sometimes someone ADHD does need that little bit of, come on now.
A lot of the time.
But in the right way and right manner almost. But of course, kid will probably click it a bit differently.
Yeah, okay. A lot of the time. But I have an ADHD coach myself. And I also have a therapist, but I've come so far with my therapist. But now, like my ADHD coach, whenever the wheels come off, Ted, you know, Ted's my ADHD
But it's lovely to be able to go, I know what I need and I'm not afraid to go and search for it. Like.
Yes. And that's the beauty of awareness and understanding.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to our brain. And when you understand what's happening in here, and you know yourself better, you can advocate for yourself. And I would say the same to parents, because it's heartbreaking. like as a parent, if your child gets a diagnosis, whether it's autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, whatever the case may be, you go online and you write 8-year-old has ADHD. Where do you start?
I know.
Where do you start? You just want to go to bed and say, I can't cope with this, but you have to cope with it because you have no choice. And that's the thing that breaks my heart is that helpless feeling. And so that was the reason, number one, when we developed the mental health education program, is I literally spent years, the person who was never academic, my God, I read for 5 years solid everything I could find out about mental health. I read it. Everybody. So
that was when you were interested in one thing, the ADHD superpower almost then kicked in, that it worked perfectly in your favour.
Like when I was in school, I just had this narrative, I'm not an academic, but it wasn't until I was 33 and I was completing my master's, I learned how to study for the first time in a way that my brain was able to study.
And I watched a video once, I don't know who it was, we don't teach kids to concentrate. We tell them to concentrate, we tell them to focus, but we don't teach them how to do it. Jim Quick, I think, is it? That's the guy say it. Yeah.
And do you know what else has come to my mind lately is one of the reasons I left the education system is because of the effect it's having on kids and on their mental health, and especially neurodivergent kids, right? Yeah. There's very little happening. And I know there are amazing organisations out there trying to make change, but the resistance to change is quite scary, to be honest. And one thing that just really struck me lately, there's all this question of why are young adults suffering? Why are teenagers suffering? You know, they need to be taught more resilience. But if you think about it, as soon as a kid starts preschool, and I know it starts before this as well in conversations in society, we're getting you ready for junior infants. When you go into junior infants, we're getting you ready for senior infants and so on. 6th class, you know, the day they start 6th class, they're learning about secondary school. The day they go into first year, they're hearing about the junior cert. Yeah. The day they finish that, they're hearing about their leaving cert. So we are constantly projecting onto our children about the future worries. Yet as soon as they turn 18 or as soon as they start to get anxious about the future, we tell them to live in the moment.
Yeah.
Now, how in the name of Nora
can
anybody switch that button when that's what's been pushed on them for their whole life? And so this whole be mindful, be mindful, be mindful.
No point telling that when you've for years put it the other way, complete opposite.
We need to be mindful.
Yeah.
With them.
Ourselves. Yeah.
And allow them to live in the moment and allow them to be children.
And let them find their own way. Like I know we talked earlier on about Sudbury School here in Sligo, which is an amazing facility.
Yeah.
And I always say I'd love if they had a summer camp. They have a summer camp for kids. I wish they have a summer camp for adults.
I'll put it to them. I will put it to them.
You know, just go, like, I mean, finally there's no Sudbury, like, like there's an art room, there's a computer room, there's a gym, there's a polytunnel, there's every room, and you go and choose. Woodwork room, you know, you choose what you do. And I often go, God, if only the mainstream schools could have some way. I know the people within them can, but the higher powers, as you said, really, really need to go, hold on a second here. You know, we're really not letting people find their own way, like, you know. I mean, like, I have a degree in environmental science. I've never used it. Doesn't mean I didn't love, but I'm just saying there's so many people like that, that let them off, let them find their way, give them more and more windows to go into and say, oh, actually, I did like that. So, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, look, I could probably talk to you for a week.
I could probably stay here for a week in my brain.
Yeah. Great, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
So, as I said, your business is, remind me yourself, Aoife Hughes.
Aoife Hughes Coaching. So that's the name of my website and that's the name of my tag on Instagram. And so I offer coaching to adults and parents. Parents do ask me to work with their children, but my boundary is I'll work with you first and then we'll see what happens after that.
Okay. And I think that's very true. You said if it only goes to the kid and then they go, how was that? How was training today at soccer or rugby or whatever? But how was it? It's like, you need to share it and you need to understand what they're actually going through. It should be more advised.
And parents are the foundation for their children. Everything comes from, like, children learn at the feet of their masters.
Yeah.
You know, and then there are some parents, understandably, or adults, and they just want to ask questions. So I just want information, and who do I go to, and what do I do, and what can I put in place? And so I offer a consultation service for that. And I give talks in schools and organisations, and I also, I'm running this course, Unlocking Emotional Mastery. And what that is basically is that mental health education program that, you know, I developed for teaching mental health education in school communities. It's the exact same, because people still aren't getting that information. However, now, because of my ADHD background, personal and professional, I'm teaching the content through the ADHD lens and linking everything to do with mental health in the brain and ADHD. And again, it's if you can't go off and read 20 books, I've done it for you.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
So
it seems like a really lovely first stop for people to go, oh, this person will guide me in some ways. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't even call it a business. It's like a service you're doing, and almost a public service, the way the state of certain things are in this country. Like, so it's amazing what your journey, your story, and what you've created. You seem that you really love what you're doing now, that you're going, I'm able to help younger Aoifes and that, you know what I mean, that maybe didn't have that person. So it must bring an amazing joy to do what you're doing and meet those people and see them helped.
It does. And the reason I love it, like, I loved teaching for years. Like, every kid I worked with, I made mistakes as a teacher as well, but I loved teaching. You know, that feedback, like, there's that joy you get and the energy you get from working with kids, and you just, you know, it's just really, really cool. And then when I was teaching the mental health education content, when you see just the light bulbs,
switch on.
It's like that gift. It's like you're passing on the baton. This is yours now. Can you pass it on to somebody else? And then with ADHD coaching, it just feels like everything has led to here for me, and to be able to help people and to let them know you don't have to just live in survival mode as an ADHDer. You really can learn to thrive. And it is something you need support with, you know, because we, as ADHDers, can go into this major shame spiral. Oh, but sure, I should just be able to cop myself on. You know, even though I have these 12 diaries, I should be able to organise myself. No, you shouldn't. You can't.
Yeah.
You
and
know,
accept that a bit. You make it your life much more comfortable.
Yeah.
Aoife, that was as interesting an insight and an interview as I've ever done on the Sligo Show. And as I said, there is no questions. We had no plan. And I love just having a chat with people.
Yeah.
What you're doing is amazing. Thank you for being very open and honest to tell your story. Obviously, I wouldn't have known any of this.
Yeah.
I think, like, we don't really bring businesses on here to do a big plug.
Yeah.
As I said, you're not a business in my eyes. You're a service. And I hope people that watch this might even go down the line of, if there's no ADHD in your life, you might even start to just go, I'm going to read a bit more about this, become a bit more understanding of it. If it's only that, right down to people who are like in a really stressful situation trying to understand. So thanks for coming on and chatting to us. And I think you'll be back again, because it seems to me there's a lot of really good stuff there that I'd love to try and help put out there into the world more if we can, you know. So.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you're doing here. And as somebody who's just moved to Sligo, I've gotten a lot of...
you find out who's the who around.
I am. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I love the chats too.
You're welcome. Thanks very much. So it's Aoife Hughes Coaching, for anyone looking you up.
That's it.
Okay, have it there. That was Aoife. Thank you very much for her coming in and telling her amazing story about herself and her business. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the Sligo Show. Thanks to Brian behind the cameras doing all the magic, and thanks to the guys at the ATU Innovation Centre for having us. We will see you all again next time. Thanks for watching.
The Sligo Show is produced by Pixel Productions and hosted by Brendan Tierney. If you need video for your business or live event, or would like to appear on the show, send us a message today.
So if you liked what you just seen, don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel here. We've loads of great interviews from a load of really interesting people over the series. And if you're on social media, which I'm sure loads of you are, we are on Instagram and Facebook, so give us a follow there.